welcome to episode 26 of the Woke-ish podcast. This is Ebony.
And this is Alma.
And this week, we are talking about motivation. How to stay motivated, ways to stay motivated, and that will be in our What's Being Slept On segment. But before we get there, we will start with our shout-out segment.
Yes, and so the first shout-out, I wanted to shout out Rachel Cargill. And she's someone that I follow on Instagram because she describes herself as a Black woman academic as well as an intersectional feminist. And recently, for her birthday, I believe she's turning 30 or 31, she is collecting funds to provide therapy for Black women and girls. So her goal is to collect $100,000, and she had already raised $20,000 the last time I had checked on it. And she says that this is a way to tell Black women, we see you, we hear you, we too are invested in your healing. And she calls this citizen-led distribution of wealth. So she has a link in her bio on Instagram that I wanted to share in case you guys wanted to follow her or if you just wanted to donate. And it's Rachel, RACHEL.CARGLE. So that's her Instagram handle. And she's really great. She always has really good quotes. She's always fighting off a lot of, most of the time, white women who attempt to discredit her work and say that she's being racist for holding white women accountable.
And they get her stuff deleted.
Yeah, they get her stuff deleted. And so I like that she's an intersectional feminist because she fits in kind of with like the ideas that I like, but she also teaches me a lot in terms of one of the things I used to do is when someone would say about issues of Black women, I would try to say, well, how does my experience as a Latina woman also agree with that? And I learned that sometimes I just have to listen and say like, okay, this isn't about how do I, even though I'm a person of color as well, I don't always have to fit into every conversation that she's having. So when they're specific about Black women, I learned to like just listen to the Black women and, it's a space for them as well, whereas some posts are also for all women of color that I can be included in. And so it's something that like even I learned as recently as this year, and it's just really helpful. And so if you're interested in her, once again, her IG is Rachel, RACHEL.CARGLE.
Yeah, so even if you can't donate, she's definitely worth following. Like yes. She I think is an example of the kind of academic that I would like to be. Mm-hmm. You know, someone who is like, yes, I'm an academic, yes, I'm a professor, but then I also am all of these other things, and I don't have to turn off those other things to fit into the mold of stereotypical academia.
Yeah. And then the second shout out goes to Nadia Murad, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for her human rights efforts. And I believe she's the second youngest person to ever do so. So she was a former ISIS sex slave, and she uses her story as a former sex slave to describe how rape is used as a weapon of war and campaigns to raise awareness of human trafficking. So I actually read a story about just how she was sold. And it's just really heartbreaking because you're reading about something that you know is happening to thousands of women, not just now, but just historically. And so for her particularly, it's really important to know, because a lot of people are like, oh, just overcoming this makes her a Peace Prize winner. But the fact that like for people from her background, from her religion, from the area of the world that she comes in, to say that she was a sex slave, to admit that she has had sex with multiple people, would automatically put her as someone who would be really vulnerable to attack. It should be considered unclean, even though it's rape. Like, it wasn't her choice. And so that's one of the things that she says, that just by coming out and saying I was a sex slave, she's already breaking boundaries. And I don't think people really understand what that means here in the Western context, because we just have a very different understanding of, even though there's a lot of sexism here, like sexism can look in different ways across the world. And so definitely shout out to Nadia Murad, who I think is incredibly brave, especially for her young age. And I think the Nobel Peace Prize for her was really well. Like, this is the type of people that should go forward to, not people like President Trump, who some people claim should get the Nobel Peace Prize. For talking to Kim Jong-un.
Okay.
I know.
Moving on. Jeez, y'all will go to whatever length. Like, golly. golly, is the president enough? Like,
I know. No, I don't want it. It's just his base. No, it's not serious. But.
Oh my god. Okay, and so the last shout out goes to someone that I know personally. She is one of my best friends. It's Nicole Cox on her promotion to management in Ernst & Young's assurance practice, making her the only Black assurance manager at EY's Los Angeles office. So we graduated college together, and she has gone on to do major things. She's working really hard. She has told me that she's been a little bit overwhelmed with all of the new responsibilities that this position comes with, but aside from that, it is a blessing, and yeah, shout out to her. I'm super proud. So I hope that if you are listening, Nicole, you are hearing your shout out. If she is not listening, somebody let her know. Okay, so now moving on to our In the Know segment.
So the first story I wanted to talk about is, if you haven't heard or seen pictures or been on Instagram, Canada becomes the second country to legalize recreational marijuana. They just did that this week. So Canada is the second country to do this after Uruguay. And it's not just medical marijuana, it's legalizing the possession and use of recreational cannabis. So just wanted to point out a couple of things. So one of the things, I was reading this article about it, and they were saying how Canadians smoke so much weed already, or consume it so much. Like, they're one of the countries that consume it the most. And so it just made sense for this country to be one of the first to do it. But what's funny to me is that a number of analysts are predicting that there's going to be a shortage of recreational marijuana in the first year of legislation as production and licensing continues to ramp up to meet demand. And this is something we saw in Colorado, where they actually shops ran out of marijuana when it first became legalized. And so this legalization fulfills a 2015 campaign promise by Prime Minister Justin, the leader of the governing Liberal Party. The federal government also predicts that it will raise about $400 million a year in tax revenues on just the sales of cannabis. And so in terms of people wondering, like, well, what exactly is legalized? Adults will be able to buy cannabis oil, seeds, and plants, as well as dried cannabis from licensed producers and retailers, and to possess up to 30 grams. That's 1 ounce, which, should last a person, at least a month. If you smoke every day, one person should last a month of dried cannabis in public or its equivalent. And so in terms of edibles or cannabis-infused foods, they will not immediately be available for purchase, but will within a year of the bill coming into force, because the delay is meant to give the government time to set out regulations specific to those products. Because if you're not aware, ingesting cannabis is different than smoking it in the terms of its potency and how long it takes for you to feel the effects. And so they're trying to set different regulations for that in about a year. And so although it's legalized, you still can't get access to cannabis. And so I'm just wondering if a lot of people are now going to be making trips to Canada to be able to... Although you can go to these states like Colorado and stuff, but it's just kind of another plus, I guess. Interesting to see, there's a lot of skepticism in terms of how they're going to be able to regulate, if this is going to impact crime. You know how people like to say the correlation of marijuana use and crime, the correlation of marijuana use and drug abuse of other drugs. And so it'd be really nice as a researcher just to see how this plays out. And so they're calling this an experiment. And so I'm really excited to see, because if we go by what we've seen in the legalization or decriminalization of marijuana in other states here in the U.S., things get better. I hate when people say oh, marijuana is a gateway drug, or oh, if you smoke marijuana, then you're more likely to smoke crack. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. I feel like if you're going to smoke crack, you're going to smoke crack. It's not, you don't die from withdrawing from marijuana, but you do die from withdrawing. You can die from withdrawing from alcohol. Alcohol.
Oh, you can die?
Yeah, you can die. If you're addicted to alcohol and you stop, you can die. Your body goes into, you can have seizures and your body can shut down. This is for extreme alcoholics.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, alcohol. And that's the only drug where you can, your body shuts down from not having it. alcohol is so dangerous, but yet we don't really know that. Because I think it's because of the people in charge and the people in charge of alcohol.
And would people say that because alcohol is legal, now you're more likely to become an alcoholic? It's like, no, I don't know. I think that if anything, we saw back in Prohibition that, like, people were, sneaking underground to drink and, overconsume.
Yeah, and the people are also questioning, like, what's going to happen to the drug dealers. Like, are they going to be...
They're going to have to get
I think
blue-collar jobs.
Yeah, well, I think hopefully now, although I'm too scared of two things, that now only really privileged people will have access to be able to be licensed to have these companies to make money, leaving the people who are drug dealers, who are just, like, on the corner or down the street, like, not able to afford to do that. They might get shut out in that way. But people are just saying, like, maybe the police just won't give a fuck about prosecuting those people, so you can still go to the dispensary or you can go to your friend down the street. Maybe they'll even be forced to lower their prices and be competitive, and so maybe that helps out the consumer. But it'll be interesting to see how that turns out, but way to go, Canada. It would be
interesting to be a researcher and go do an ethnography.
Yeah,
Okay, so our second in the know goes to Corner Store Caroline. Y'all have probably heard about this because it is ridiculous. So a white woman in a Flatbush corner store, yes, there was a white woman in Flatbush, falsely accused, a 9-year-old black boy of sexually assaulting her and called the police on him. So her name is Teresa Klein. She's been dubbed Corner Store Caroline after Jason Littlejohn posted footage on his Facebook page of her calling the police on 9-year-old Jeremiah Harvey. So in the video, which has already gotten over 7 million views since it was posted last Wednesday, Klein is seen arguing with Jeremiah's mother after accusing the boy of grabbing her butt. Jeremiah is seen and heard crying hysterically as his mother goes back and forth with Klein, who is captured on film allegedly speaking to authorities about the incident. However, officers never arrived to the scene, and an NYPD spokesperson tells Time there is no proof that she ever called 911 to report the incident. 2 days after the incident, Klein returns to the Flatbush bodega and viewed surveillance footage that clearly shows that Jeremiah did not grab Klein and that it was most likely his backpack that brushed up against her. And in the video, he's, like, not paying her any attention at all. Like, he's running out of the store after his mom. He probably was irritated being in there anyways, and he didn't even notice her. Surrounded by locals, Klein is seen telling a camera crew she was mistaken in a separate Facebook video posted by Littlejohn. Finally, after reviewing the tape, she says, "I was wrong. Young man, I don't know your name, but I'm sorry." Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams held a community meeting days later with Jeremiah, who delivered a simple message through tears. Friendship is really the key. Jeremiah also firmly rejected Klein's apology, telling WABC after the meeting that "I don't forgive this woman at all. She needs help."
Which I'm kind of glad, because people are always like, ask us, people of color, to forgive. Yeah. And I understand, I'm in no way taking away from the people who find it in their heart to do that. But I think sometimes, like, be real and be like, no, like, I mean, even though she didn't end up calling the police, like, she could have.
Yeah, and she pretended to. For what? Like, dramatic effect?
And the historical implications of white women claiming sexual assault on, like, young boys is very real in this, and it's not something that's forgotten. And
you shouldn't take it lightly. Like, he's probably traumatized now.
Yeah, I mean, I would be. And it made,
if you watch the video, the way he was crying, it was just so sad.
Yeah,
like, I was
his
so
sister,
sad.
His little sister crying. I was sad too, because it just, like, at 9 years old, I've nannied 9-year-old boys, and I just, like, if they rubbed up against me, I would not think, like, oh, he's thinking sexually of me because he's fucking 9.
But no, it's because he's black, and black children are so hypersexualized, hypercriminalized, all of these things. And so the assumption that and then I also didn't realize until I was looking at the review footage that she's old.
She is old.
And so it's like, why?
And she's a smoker, so she looks older.
So it's like, I mean, I'm not trying to say that old people can't be attractive, but girl, if a 9-year-old is going to grab somebody's butt, do you really think it was going to be yours? Now, come on, let's be real. Let's be honest. So I was just like, no, this is ridiculous, and all the backlash that she's gotten, she deserves.
Yes. Yeah.
So, in a similar vein, we also had an apartment Patty this past week, aka Hillary Brooke Mueller, who harassed Darion Tolles last Friday night while he was trying to enter the apartment complex where they both live. And so she has now been fired from her job. That's the newest headline. So if you hadn't heard, Hillary, who was exiting the building to walk her dog, refused to let Darion into the complex. She insisted that he show her proof that he lived in the building. He repeatedly told her that he didn't need to give her proof and simply said, "Excuse me," several times as he tried to enter. She was literally blocking the door with her body and would not let him get in. Like, it was so ridiculous. And she kept saying, "Well, if you live here, show me. Show me." And several times he said the name of the manager, and he said, "You're not this person," and named the manager and said, "I don't pay rent to you." Like,
and she doesn't work there.
Yeah, you're not security. Like, let me in. And she's like, "Well, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe." Okay, so he pushed past her, and then she followed him onto the elevator, continuing to badger him all the way up to his door. She kept saying, and then once she got, the funny thing is, like, once he finally got to the door, she was like, "Oh, well, now that I know you're a neighbor, I want to know your name and introduce myself." Like, girl, bye. No, I don't want to be introduced to you. I don't want anything to do with you.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, she's ridiculous. So, over the weekend, Miss Mueller's employer, Tribeca STL, which manages real estate elsewhere in the city, said in a statement on its website that it had reviewed the video and fired her. Tribeca does not own the building where Mr. Tolles and Miss Mueller live, but they consider themselves to be a minority-owned company, and it consists of employees and residents from many racial backgrounds, and it manages, an apartment complex in St. Louis. And they say, "We're proud of this fact and do not and never will stand for racism or racial profiling at our company." Mr. Tolles said on Sunday that about 30 minutes after he got into his unit, a police officer did come to his door. They knocked and told him that Miss Mueller felt, quote-unquote, uncomfortable about Mr. Tolles being there. He said he told the officer that he was renting the unit and that he had shown Miss Mueller his key fob. So the fact that he even had to go through all of that, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I don't know what these people want or expect from Black boys and Black men. It's like they're just trying to live their lives just like you, and you're making it your business to turn their lives upside down. Like, just leave people alone and just mind your business.
Or the fact, like, if you're scared of someone, why would you confront them?
And why would you follow them to their door? Like, you're not afraid.
It's that enough that she would be like, "Oh, I'm going to call the cops." But to follow someone and confront them shows that you're not really scared. It's something deeper than that. It was, I saw the video too, and it's just really frustrating, and it totally is racial profiling, and people are like, no, I saw people on Instagram saying he could have just showed her proof, and it's like, well, why does he? He shouldn't have to,
but he did. He entertained her, and he showed her his key fob. He even said several times the name of the managers.
Yeah.
So it's like, why couldn't you at that point just accept defeat and move on? Like, pick your jaw up off the floor and go walk your dog. Why do you have to follow someone to their door?
Because you have this entitlement and privilege that you lived with all your life, that you feel like you can do and say anything. And, so for people saying, "Oh, white people have to," and it's the same with, like, the Me Too movement. People are being like, "Oh, it's a horrible time to be a man. It's a horrible time to be white." It's like, no, like, now we found a new way to point out to you that what you're doing is not cool.
Yeah.
And this has always been happening. It wasn't just this year that all these white women have started doing these things. Yeah. It's been, like,
we just
always
bringing attention to it.
Yeah, and we found an effective way to be able to hold these women accountable. And I say these women because most of the time it's white women.
Yeah, all these stories, there have been white women, and they just use the police like their personal security.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've also been seeing a lot of other, like, white women that are not, doing these sorts of things, saying how embarrassed they are.
Yeah.
As white women, that there are white women doing these things. And it's like, I don't want you to just be embarrassed. Talk to your people, talk to your friends, talk to your family, and tell them, like, no, stop abusing 911, because it can cost people of color their lives. And you take that so lightly. And it's like, no, this is serious. This is a serious matter for folks. It's not like, this is not just fun and games, you know?
Yeah.
And so people, I think that it was is it in New York where they were saying that they're going to start criminalizing?
I hope so.
Like abuse of 911. And I hope so too, and I hope that other states follow suit, because this is out of control. Like, you can't just use 911 for everything just because you feel uncomfortable. Check yourself.
Yeah. So 2 different stories with similar...
in the same week.
Similar, I think, motivation, which is racial profiling. And both these women, I saw their interviews, claim not to be racist. And even this Hillary Mueller person attempted to cry and say that she was heartbroken, that she was called a racist. And it's just like... you feel worse about being called a racist than the embarrassment of the fact that you like fucked up and did this to someone. If I did that to someone and if I forget your name, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so sorry. If I assume that you're not married to the person, or you're not with the person you're with, like things like that. If I had done this, I would feel terrible and be like, okay, life lesson. I'm never doing that again. That was awful. I'm fucked up. But she just turned it around and was like, why are people mean to me?
And it's like, don't be sad that you were called racist. Be sad that you are racist.
Yeah.
Like, you are. This is your fault. You could have minded your business, but you did not. You chose to call the police. And so these are the consequences of your actions.
Yes.
Period. Okay, so now we're going to move on to something a little bit better, or a lot of bit better. So we're going to move on to our What's Being Slept On segment, where we're going to be discussing how to stay motivated.
So I strongly suggest that you wake the fuck up.
Okay, so now for our What's Being Slept On segment. We're discussing motivation, how to stay motivated, what you do when you aren't motivated, how you can get reinvigorated. And so we have here a few questions and some tips.
Yes.
So first question, at this time, what is your biggest motivation or goal?
So before, I think my goals have shifted, especially since I became pregnant. Now my goal is just to finish this program. It used to be like, get out of here with 10 publications, job at a tier 1 university, blah, 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 blah. And now I'm just like, fuck that. I just want to get a PhD and to survive this delivery, because it's just, I'm just more... I don't want... I think a lot of the goals that I had weren't goals that I wanted. They were just goals that I thought I had to have. And so setting these goals of like, I want to be happy, which includes graduating from this program and having this baby and being okay, is good enough for me. And so at this moment, that's what my goals are. And so my biggest motivation is to be a happy person, because I don't want to be this like stressed out, overwhelmed mom who like doesn't enjoy her first child, or this stressed out, overwhelmed person who doesn't enjoy the fact that I'm going to accomplish something that only less than 1% of Latinos have been able to accomplish.
And 1% of people, period.
Yeah, and 1% of people, period. And so it's just kind of like, I don't want to look back and be like, damn, my 20s went by real fast, and not have memories of actually enjoying my 20s. Yeah. So for me, that's what my biggest motivation is to be happy and accomplish those 2 goals.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I like something that you said. So, and I think that it's super important for this stage in our life, which is knowing where your motivation and your goals come from in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I remember, and I guess it's like parents, right? Parents in general, they, suggest that you pursue certain majors in college. and then certain careers, you know, because they want you to be, you know, they want you to be successful, they want you to have money, they want you to be taken care of and all that stuff. But then you go through a period where you're trying to figure out who you are, like the, you know, early 20s. Yeah. And it's like, what do I want in general? What are my goals, my personal goals that I'm defining for myself and that, you know, no one else is imposing on me? And I think that that is a really hard realization to come to, especially if you've been doing something, you know, pursuing something in college, and then you finish college and you're like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this, you know? So yeah, trying to figure out what your motivation and your goals are for yourself in the first place is hard. But my biggest motivation and my goals, I guess, so I don't know. I guess this is hard for me because I have things that I would like in an ideal world, goals that I would like in an ideal world. So I want to publish a book. Well, several books, but a book very soon. And even though my initial goal was not this, I think that the first one will be my dissertation. And so that is like my primary goal. And then, you know, getting a job obviously is a goal, but the thing is that I don't know what job that I do know what job that I want, I just don't know if I can get it. So it's like, you know, struggling to be, you know, optimistic, but then also realistic is hard. So my realistic goal is to get a job that pays me well, that I'm happy in. My optimistic goal would be to get a publishing contract and then be an author for the rest of my life, and maybe a speaker and stuff like that. But step one is to publish this book and, you know, to get a PhD and whatever. So what would you say is the hardest thing about staying motivated?
I think for me, in terms of my goals, is how long it's taking. Just because I think sometimes when you have goals like, I'm going to lose 30 pounds this year, like, it's something you can track short term that you're like, oh, this month I lost 5 pounds. That makes me feel like I'm seeing something. But when you're in a PhD program for going on 5 years, you're just kind of like, it's hard to remember that the initial feeling that you had the first day of school or when you were applying of like, I'm going to, you know, this is what I'm going to do. I'm so excited. I got accepted to this program. It's great. And so I think that the hardest thing for me about staying motivated is just like how long it's taking me to accomplish the goals. And I know part of that's because I've chosen goals that take longer. But just when I see other people accomplishing their goals a lot earlier, it makes me feel like really frustrated and just kind of like, that also takes away like the wind beneath my sails where I'm just kind of like, man, this is taking so long. I'm almost going to be 30 and still haven't accomplished the one goal I set like 5 years ago. And so for me, I think right now the hardest thing is just how long it's taking.
Yeah, I think that we definitely chose fields where the gratification is like super delayed. You know, and the goalpost keeps moving because it's like the long-term goal is to get it. Well, the long-term goal is to get a job with the PhD, right? But in order to get a job, we had to do a master's thesis. Well, I had to do a master's thesis, had to pass your comprehensive exams, which was like, so there's all these like really small goals within this bigger goal, and it's like once you accomplish one thing, you want to celebrate, but you can't because now you got to work towards the next one. And so the goalpost keeps moving. And I would say that that's hard for me too. And I think also, really settling in, like what I was saying before, really settling in on what I want for myself. So not setting goals that are there to appease or pacify or make somebody else happy, but to set goals that are completely self-motivated and that are set for my own happiness. And coming up with those goals happened while I was in this program. And I was like, well, I'm not about to drop out, even though now I don't really care to be a professor or whatever. So I changed my goal, I guess, from being a professor to getting the PhD and then finding a career that better suits me and my personality and will make me happy. But now, because of that, I have to do extra work to try to make sure that I qualify for that. And so that, I think, is one of the things that makes it hard for me to stay motivated is adjusting my goals and then trying to, like, get reboot myself to work toward that goal when it's like, okay, I've had on blinders and I've been focused on this, but now I need to shift gears and gear up again and focus on this over here. And so I guess that ties in really well with the next point, which is burnout. So what is burnout?
So just looking up a definition, burnout is the mental and physical exhaustion you experience when the demands of your work consistently exceed the amount of energy you have available. And so I wanted to talk about just signs of burnout, because that sounds like, you describe that and you're like, yeah, that sounds right. But like, what does it actually look like? And so some of the signs of burnout is apathy. So like a lack of interest in the things that you were once interested in. And so for me, like, I realized I was burnt out when I was just kind of like, a PhD doesn't seem as meaningful to me as it did 3 years ago. Physical fatigue. I think a lot of times we don't realize that the emotional and the physical are tied. So if you're mentally worn out, that impacts your physical state of your physical state. And so you actually get tired from being emotionally and mentally worn out. And then feeling overwhelmed, where you kind of feel the sense of like, I just don't know if I'm going to reach my goal anymore, because there's so many things that I need to accomplish in order to get to that goal, and they seem so unrealistic at this point. And I think recently I have felt those things about my motivation to get this PhD, particularly this year. And being pregnant adds physically to the exhaustion of it, but also to me added the feeling of, how am I now supposed to accomplish this goal when I just, I'm doing something that's making it that much harder to accomplish this goal, which is having a child while in school, and just trying to be like, so already I think I was at the edge of like, I'm barely hanging on, like trying to pull forward. And then finding out I was pregnant, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is just going to be so much harder. And so I think like for me, that's the state that I'm at, is like, I definitely feel burnt out. And I think that's the motivation for this episode, with Ebony and I trying to figure out like, well, then what do we do from here? Like once we realize we're burnt out, that we're physically tired, emotionally overwhelmed, like what are the ways to overcome burnout and to stay motivated? And so that's what we're shifting to this next half of this segment, which is, okay, now that we know what our motivations are, how hard it can be to stay motivated, and what it looks like and feels like when you're not motivated, how do we overcome that? So I just wanted to talk about some tips to overcome burnout. I'm in no way a mental health professional, but just this is things that I found to be helpful that I wanted to share from my experience. The first is to take breaks. And so I know sometimes it seems like I'm just going to keep pushing, I'm going to keep pushing, I'm going to keep pushing, and I'm going to celebrate once I accomplish this goals. But if you have a goal like ours, where it's like get a PhD in, 5 to 6 years, write a book, however long that takes, like if you wait to take a break until you accomplish your goal, you're going to like be miserable. And so I recently took a mini vacation where I didn't have access to Wi-Fi. And so I couldn't do work. I couldn't do emails. And I literally just like laid around and read a book for fun. And I hadn't done that in a really long time. And it really helped me. Like I came back from that 2 or 3 days feeling like, okay, I could do the next week. And I really felt like before I went on that break that I was just like almost to the edge of I can't, like I'm really frustrated with a lot of things.
Taking breaks. Okay, so I take breaks, and I mean, I don't know. It's hard because I take breaks, but then I feel guilty about taking the breaks. So I haven't gotten to the point where I completely unplug. But as far as getting out of Houston, as far as spending time with my partner, I prioritize that. And that didn't come immediately. I think that I had gotten to the point of burnout before I realized that was something that I wanted and needed.
I started maybe like 2.5 years into the program, and I was like, you know what, every once in a while, like, I need to take a step back, because I was getting to the point where I was like so frustrated with this program. I was so frustrated with having to like come to campus and interact with academic, or even like use academic lingo. Like, I was exhausted with just having to talk and fake and wear the hat. It was too much. So I definitely empathize with that. I think that that's critical, because I think that there's, I don't know, I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like there are different phases of burnout. Yeah. You know, like, there's a burnout where, like, okay, I'm exhausted, I need to take a break, and I can come back. And then I think you get to a point where it's like, you know what, I'm just too run down, I'm done, you know. Yeah. And then you have to leave, or you have to, you know, quit things. So I think it's important to take breaks before you get to that point, where you're like completely done. And so then the second, way to overcome burnout is to reflect on why your work matters. Yeah. That's super important. Yeah. And I think, you know, also, like, just, I think that when you were talking initially and you were saying how you felt when you know, were initially applying or initially got in, and I just thought about that, you know, and reflected back on like where I was, how I felt, you know, calling my parents and all of that. And I think that getting back to the point where you can think about and recall what motivated you to get into what you're doing in the first place, and kind of try to channel some of that energy, and like, you know, oh, I was so excited, I was looking forward to doing X, Y, and Z with this. You know, what incentivized you to, even though, cause like, even for instance, this PhD program, I knew that it was going to take 5 years when I was applying. Yeah. But for some reason, the 5 years didn't seem too crazy at first. And then when I got in it, you know, and even though the years have gone by pretty fast, it's still like, you know, even though I only have like a year or so left, this year feels like it's dragging on longer than the last 4 years have. You know, and I know that that's a mental thing, you know, my mind playing tricks on me, but it's like, it's important to take a step back and to reevaluate what motivated you to do the thing that you're pursuing in the first place. Yeah. And for me, what's been helpful is, so I lately have been like a speaker or speaking to people about being a PhD student, and it's really brought a lot of, I guess, motivation back in terms of like, so I recently spoke at a middle school that was like over 90% Latino about being a PhD student, and just the fact that how they looked at me and they clapped, and like the response I got from teachers and how appreciative they were of having me come in there and speak to them about pursuing a higher education made me feel like, oh yeah, like it's important to get a PhD, because, and as I was even saying to them, it's important to get a PhD as a Latino because so few of us get it. I only had 3 Latino professors in all 12 years that I've had in higher education. And that's insane, given that the city that I live in is 40% Latino. And so, like, even saying that was like reminding myself, like, oh yeah, this is the reason why getting a PhD was important to you. And so I think that that's been really helpful for me too, is the way that I've been reflecting on my work is by talking to others about it. And that helps me to remind myself, like, why it is what I'm doing matters. And then the response that I get from other people of like, oh, that's really great that, you know, you want representation, that this is so important to you. And I found that to be really helpful. And so I think like a way to overcome burnout is in whatever way that you can reflect on your work. It may be posting on social media, like saying, you know, 5 years ago, I wanted to do this. Now I'm this. I'm that much closer. And getting feedback from people telling you like, oh, that's really great. Keep going. That's a way that you can reflect on your work. Or talking to your family, or just something where you're just like reminding yourself of some way, writing a letter to yourself saying like, this is where I am, to your future self, to your past self. Like those are ways that you can reflect on why your work matters. And I think that will really help in overcoming burnout, because that really has for me. Yeah. Okay, so the last
way, and I'm sure that there are plenty more, but is to unplug. And so I think that for me, this helps with when I'm feeling, I think that this primarily helps me when I'm feeling like, oh, is what I'm doing even enough, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like we work so hard, and then I'm like looking on social media at all these people that are super poppin', that seem to have just everything all together, financial stability, emotional stability, mental stability, and then I'm over here like, oh my God, you know, it's 2 a.m. and I'm still working on whatever, you know? And I think that it's important in those moments to take a step back and to remind myself that my journey is mine, and that I don't need to compare or compete or whatever with anybody else. It's like everybody has their own journey. And often I go back and I saved one of those memes that talks about it has all these like celebrities or super accomplished people like Oprah, and it's like, oh, remember that when Oprah was 26, she got fired from yada yada, and you know, so and so didn't do this until they were 40 and all that stuff. And it I think brings me back to reality, and it's like, okay, you have more time than you think you do, because I constantly feel like, oh my God, I need to rush, I need to move faster, like what am I doing? My life is passing me by and I haven't done anything. But yeah, I think it's important to, whatever helps you to snap yourself out of that daze or those moments where you feel unmotivated, you feel burnt out, you maybe feel a little bit insecure, you might feel inadequate. It's like, do those things. Seek out those things that help you and you alone. It's not about anybody else, you know, because I talked about how like a lot of times I feel guilty. I feel like, oh, I'm not working enough, or I'm not working hard enough, or I'm taking a break, or I'm out of town or whatever. And it's like, so what? If that's what makes you happy, if that's what makes you, feel reinvigorated and like I can actually take on the next couple tasks or the next year and a half to finish this program, or, you know, right now I'm working on my dissertation. Like I need to get through that. And I felt like as I embark on a new goal within the context of grad school, it's like you have to start sprinting again, you know? And so it's like you finish this long sprint just to meet this goal to start sprinting again with no break in between. You know, and so I think it's like I felt that after these last few months of starting the work of on my dissertation, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm over this. You know, and so gotta take a break, bring yourself back to reality, remind yourself why you got into this in the first place, remind yourself why this is important to you, and just think about the end goal, what it's gonna feel like when you get there, because you will get there.
Yeah. And so we talked about the signs of what burnout is, the signs of burnout, how to overcome burnout. But now we wanted to close with how to recover from burnout. Mm-hmm. And so the how to overcome is just like tips to like stop being burnt out. Mm-hmm. But once you stop being burnt out, it's like, how do you get yourself back into it? And so the first is, of course, I'm always a huge proponent of talking to someone in terms of, it doesn't have to be a mental health professional, but it really helps because they're specifically trained to be able to help. But I also know that can be quite expensive. And so just talking to someone, whether it be, for example, this week, I see my therapist, but I talk to my therapist about different things. So I don't always want to talk about, sometimes I don't have enough time to talk about everything in my therapy session. And so this week in particular, I had my meeting with my advisor, and she just straight out told me, she's like, you don't look good. She's like, you look really tired. Mm-hmm. And I was, because I'm having less and less sleep. And it's because I'm getting more and more uncomfortable now, this in my third trimester of my pregnancy. And so she was just like, when you go home, like, don't do any more work today. Mm. She's like, don't worry about doing anything. Just go home and watch this baseball game. And it's really helpful to, like, in my sense, get permission to, like, not do anything. And so I think, like, I try to be really good about letting people know that I need help. But I think at that moment, like, she was able to tell me, like, you need to stop. And so if you're around friends, if you're around family, and they kind of point out, like, you don't seem yourself, or are you okay, or you sound stressed, what's going on? Like, take that as hints of, like, okay, like, maybe I do need to put on the brakes, pump the brakes, and, like, do something here.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I guess mine usually comes in the form of, like, me being irritable, you know, and just being easily annoyed. Like, when I'm stressed out, I don't really want to talk about anything, you know, but it's like the people around me may not necessarily be stressed. So they're trying to have regular conversation with me, like, and I'm like, no, I feel like I don't want to talk. And so I might, you know, seem irritated or get easily irritated. And when usually my boyfriend points those things out to me, then I have to check myself and be like, okay, I'm sorry, like, I'm just stressed, you know, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. And it's important to pay attention to that and to shift gears based on that, because I think that we also feel like we are required to keep going and to push through and all of that. And like Zelma said earlier, you know, your mental state can ultimately impact your physical health. And so you have to pay attention to that. It's like, oh, you feel like you might be able to tolerate some stress, some anxiety, some feelings of being overwhelmed, some panic and all that stuff until it starts to take a toll on your health. And then it's like, oh shoot, I can't handle that. So to nip that in the bud and to face it early on, it's important to pay attention to how you're feeling and your stress levels and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and that goes with our next point, which is to lean on friends. And so sometimes, particular for me and my personality, I feel like if I talk to my friends about my issues, that it's like a burden. It's like, oh, my friends don't want to know. They must be tired of hearing me complain about being pregnant.
Yeah, which is like, you did not tell me about all this. Like, I'm hearing all this stuff that you're saying right now, I'm hearing for the first time.
But it's just like, and that's because and it goes back to like how in my family dynamic, I was just raised to be really tough. And it's like, you tough it out, like, life is shitty, life is hard.
It's hard for everybody.
Yeah, it's hard for everyone. You're no different. Yeah. And so, like, as working on this podcast and, like, thinking about these things, it's like, this is the part where I need to work on the most, which is leaning on other people, because I let a lot of people lean on me. You know, I volunteer to have people lean on me. I'm in my family and in my friendship networks, I'm the person that people call to talk things through. And I like that role. I like being that person, but I also forget that I need to do that to them too. And so I think that, you know, after my advisor kind of told me, like, you need to stop, I feel more open to be like, okay, like, I'm at a point now where it's probably okay to be like, pregnancy is making me really tired and I am feeling really overwhelmed. And so I think actually last night I broke down to my partner and I was just crying and I was like, I am so uncomfortable. And I didn't even know where it came from. I was like, I'm so uncomfortable. Because I was trying to work on this table, just making a table. And it was taking me hours because I can only sit in one position for so long before I get uncomfortable and I have to stop working. And so I was just crying and I was like, I am so unproductive now. Like, I can't do it. Like, I have so much to do. I don't see how I'm supposed to finish this much of my dissertation before the baby comes. I still have to do all these things and I feel really uncomfortable. I don't feel good. And just like, saying it made me feel so much better, because I think for me there's this perception of like, I have to be a happy pregnant woman because you know,
because of Instagram, people make it look so cute.
It's like, it's bad if you complain about being pregnant, then people come with you of saying you should be happy. A lot of people can't get pregnant, or with the whole like, it's a blessing, or with the whole like, you're gonna miss it when it's gone. And I don't think it's okay for us to say like, there are some parts of pregnancy that are not cool, that are kind of like burdenous, and they take a toll on you, and it's like wearing you down, and it's sometimes it is really like you kind of like don't like it. And so I think that's what I'm learning about this burnout, and particularly with being pregnant, it's because it's a different type of burnout than the burnout I experienced in the past, because it wasn't coupled with this physical, like, actual difference. So before I was just stressed, where now it's like, there's like my body, like even the way that I breathe, there's more oxygen going to the baby, so there's less oxygen going to me. And so my therapist was explaining to me, like, that oxygen that used to just go to you really helped you be productive, helped you like get energized, helped you do feel good, and now there's less oxygen to your brain because it's going to the baby, so you feel more tired, like that's physically. Deep. Yeah, and I was just like, just thinking like physically I'm burnt out because I'm like making something. And so just reminding that to myself and feeling like, okay, I should share that with other people. And I think not only because I get support from people, but like other people will know, like when you're pregnant, you're going to feel this way. And if I don't share that with you, because I'm one of the first people in my friend groups to get pregnant, they're not going to know, like, this is a real part of pregnancy. And then when they experience that, they're not going to feel like that's okay. And so I just wanted to make sure to be, like, transparent about that, in that my burnout, a part of my burnout is, like, being pregnant.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing. Okay, and so lean on friends. I mean, I'm not good at that. I don't do it well at all. So yeah. I should get better, but
I mean, there are different people recover in different ways.
Like, I don't really know how to like talk to people about issues that I'm having. I mean, I'll tell people like, months later, like, oh yeah, 6 months ago this X, Y, and Z happened, but in the moment, it doesn't come naturally to me. But I also wanted to add one thing that I do like to do is so I know people do vision boards, for the beginning of the year, but I try to do them, several times, like throughout the year, in order to bring myself back to what my vision is or what my goals are. And I think that that's really helpful to me. I don't like post my vision boards up around the house or anything. I just, I put it in a certain place and then I'll take it out, look at it every day for a week, and then be like, okay, I'm recentered. Like, I know what I'm trying to do. Because sometimes it's like your goals can get away from you when you're tired and when you're exhausted. It's like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, why am I putting myself through this? I'm miserable. But then you recenter yourself and you're like, oh yeah, okay. So now it's on this pretty, like, colorful board with all of these, like, magazine cutouts, and I can see clearly where I'm headed or where I'm trying to go. Okay. And so third, to recover from burnout is rest. And so I think that, that's kind of similar, maybe similar. No, I guess not too similar to taking a break. I guess this rest is like to literally like lay down. Right?
Yeah. Like take a break. Some people can be like, for 30 minutes, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
Or for the rest of the day, I'm going to do this. But like rest is like, physically lay down on the sofa, watch TV, chill with your pets. Like, you need to fit, like, because, like, we're talking, it's physical impacts, the mental impacts the physical. So, if your mind is racing at 1,000 miles a minute, like, that's putting a lot of stress and strain on your body that you need to take account for. And so, literally, just, like, we mean, like, take naps, rest, lay down.
And a lot of times you can feel your body demanding that, because I don't know if you've heard of, like, the statement, like, when I have so many things to do, I just want to take a nap.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's your body literally, like, saying, lay your ass down.
Yeah.
You're exhausted. And so it's like, whenever your body is speaking to you, listen, because it's, a lot of times that's the first warning.
Yeah.
And then there are other warnings that come from that. Like, like before I went out of town, I was like so anxious, like I couldn't sleep. And so I would fall asleep and then I would wake up at like 3 a.m. and then just be up for the rest of the morning. And it's like that is literally my body responding to my anxiety, is that I couldn't stay awake. I couldn't stay asleep. And then I would just be up thinking about, oh my gosh, okay, well, tomorrow, whenever you get up, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And it was like, no, I never needed to get up because I was up, and then that means that I'm super tired and I don't really have enough energy to do what I need to do the next day.
Yeah.
But if you do, I don't know what some people like I like to make to-do lists. So to-do list throughout the day, and it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to work on. And if I don't get to all these things, then those shift to my to-do list for the next day. And so it's important to make sure that you prioritize, that you have, the things that you need to get done. And that helps your bigger goal to become more realistic. You know, it's like, all right, I have these smaller goals that I'm working toward every day, and then I have this big goal, maybe for the end of the week, and then for the end of the month, for the end of the semester, whatever. That helps me a lot.
Yeah, and that goes with our next point of do what you can.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you know, and this is something I've learned recently. It's like, yeah, I want to do all these things every day, but I have to be happy with doing what I can. Yeah. And not being so hard on myself and not having super crazy expectations of this week you're going to do 20 interviews and you're going to turn in these applications and you're going to do this extra thing and you're going to get the baby room, nursery ready and you're going to do all these things. It's like, okay, today I'm just going to try to do my best, and whatever I don't get to, like Ebony said, can shift for tomorrow, because the most important thing is that you're okay.
Yeah.
And which ties into our last point of look out for your health. And so we talk a lot about the connection of the mental and the physical, and that's not only because I'm a health researcher, and those are the two areas that I work on and that I see, but also because I experience it, like when I feel really overwhelmed and stressed, like my health there's a toll on my health, and like what's happening to your body is everything gets inflamed because of stress, and so your body's literally like on hyper alert, and so you're using all these reservoirs of energy to just be on hyper alert and to be inflamed, and all that is taking extra like juice or energy from you that you're normally not using because you're stressed and overwhelmed and burnt out. And so that leaves you susceptible to like getting a cold because your immune system isn't at its strongest because all this energy is being used to be on hyper alert. Yeah. And so I think that sometimes, you know, especially for people who are like, oh my gosh, I get sick a lot. Like I get a cold, I get infections. I don't know why I'm so sick. And it's like, well, you know, sometimes it's not just you're around sick people or someone got you sick or germs. Yeah, sometimes it's like looking at, well, what is it in my life right now that's contributing to my physical well-being? And a lot of that time, it can be something that's tied to your emotional state. And so that's why we emphasize that it's really important to look out for your health, because you can't recover from a burnout and stay recovered if you're unhealthy or if you're not feeling your best. And so it's really important that you look out for your health by listening to your body, like Ebony said. And if you feel yourself feeling anxious, or if you feel yourself being sick more often than you're used to, if you feel yourself being really tired to the point where it's like 4 p.m. and you like have to go to sleep because you just like me right now. Yeah, like it may not just be you're lazy. It may just be like your body's literally telling you like, hey, like we need to chill. Yeah. And so, yeah, these are just like tips and points that I found to be helpful for me, that some of these are inspired from the research that I do. Some of them are inspired from like articles that we found on the internet, but mostly just what we found to be effective in our own lives. And, you know, we're graduate students, but that doesn't mean that other people who are not graduate students or in school or working don't have issues with motivations or burnout. This impacts all of us. And it doesn't matter your age either. Like stress and burnout is just, I think, really American. Because there's so much, we're such like a...
there's so much emphasis on work and like work. And it's like, you have to, and we even have like, whenever we do play or have like free time, it's associated with work. Yeah. You know, it's like you have to work so that you can play. Yeah. Whereas you'll look at other cultures, you know, like I love Italy's culture where it's like at lunchtime, people are eating with their families. Shit shuts down, you know, and it's we don't have that. Like, we're like work around the clock, work through lunch, you know, like work at night, work overnight. Like, it's ridiculous. It's obsessive and I hate it. But because this is the culture that I'm in, I guess to a certain extent, I have to fall in line. Yeah. But it's like you have to pay attention to yourself. You are not living this life for anybody else. And if you get too stressed, and then you're suddenly unhealthy, and then you get sick and you drop dead, guess who? You think that your employers or whatever are going to lose sleep? No, they're going to replace you. And so
they're not going to say, he worked really hard.
No, they're not. They're not. And so you need to make sure that you take care of yourself, because you will regret it if you do not.
No one is going to look out for you like you can look out for you.
Say it again. Okay.
So, if you have any questions, any feedback, want to reach out to us for shout outs, for future topics, for things that you found helpful or unhelpful, feel free to send us an email at woke.ishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at wokeishpodcast. We always love listening to, we always love getting feedback from you guys, whether it is sharing it through your IG story, tagging us in posts. Look out for clips that we post every week about the episode. Thank you so much for listening, and it's nice to have to be back after a week off, and hope you were able to catch up. But we'll be doing our scheduled episode next week.
Yes.
So see you then.
Bye.